Welcome to the Zachrilege cast. Bart Campolo, welcome aboard.
That is quite an opening, Zach.
Well, some people who do podcasts do that kind of intro music, and I just do it myself, especially since this portion is live. So yeah, you just gotta go
No,
with what you have.
seems like a huge. I mean, it's not just a money saver, but also just there's a sort of an artistry to
You say that now. We'll see how you feel in 45 minutes.
it.
So this is an interesting timing for an interview. So we actually met in person last weekend at Nanocon in Nashville. But where are you located right now?
Well, I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, but today I flew up to Madison, Wisconsin, to speak at something called the Free Thought Festival in Madison, and unfortunately my plane got canceled. I got rerouted to Philadelphia. Then they cut me over here. So I thought I would be in a lovely, quiet space to talk to you. Actually, I am opposite the gift shop in the Madison airport.
It's just, whatever it takes. And I do have the official Nanocon badge. Actually,
Look at you.
I doctored it up because I bought a ticket and then I was doing the podcast panel. So I think technically I had two. So I just made up my own, but I wanted to at least. And I have the shirt on, but I know some people get upset when I stand up during the middle of the show. So I won't do that. But we will start with the one out of context quote I have from you. It's from your last episode of your podcast. You are spiritually promiscuous.
That is something I said about somebody else.
That's exactly why it's out of context.
Yes. I have a very close friend who is a religious junkie, and he travels all over the world, and he thinks they're all amazing. He wants to participate. Like he doesn't study them. He wants to participate in all of them. And I called him spiritually promiscuous, and he laughed and said, "That's true."
Yeah, that is true. You get this view of that it's a monolith and like everybody's exactly the same, and especially if you belong to an Abrahamic religion, they're like, oh no, you can't, that's it, you're one thing. But I'm sure there are people who want to see how the other half lives, right?
Well, yeah, and he and I both started out as kind of evangelical Christians when we were in college, and he's lived this kind of big life, traveled all over the world, and he just what's interesting is that when I got exposed to all these kind of other religions, I was like, oh, none of them are true, including mine. When he got exposed to them, he was like, oh, they're all true. Like they all have something. They all, and he's kind of a woo-woo guy. And so, he just sort of imbibes it all. And, it's just really interesting because, the idea, sometimes I feel like, some of my rationalist friends are like, if we could all agree on the data, we would all agree. And we're like, oh no. The data alone will not create unanimity. Different people take the same data and interpret it completely differently.
Yeah, that's very true. You haven't realized that kind of comes in and slaps you in the face, like, but look at my, never mind. Oh, my data plus my point of view, and that's not what you have. But so before we get to the glory that is Nanocon 4, the symphony for your ears that is Humanize Me, and the many works and achievements of Bart Campolo, we have to go back to the beginning. So you kind of referred to your journey. So what was kind of your religious journey, growing up? I think the son of a pastor, correct?
My dad, I grew up, my dad was a college professor, but he was also, like, in his spare time, sort of an evangelical Christian icon. He was a guy who spoke at conferences and churches and youth festivals all over the country, wrote books, made video series. Like, if you hang out with evangelical Christians, and you mentioned the name Tony Campolo, like, if they're between the ages of about 35 and 75, they'll all know him. He was a big deal. I mean, in certain circles, he still is a big deal. He's 83 years old. So, like, at some point, you don't get invited to speak at the youth festivals anymore. But like, my dad was speaking at youth festivals well into his 70s. Like, he's this kind of ball of energy, and he's probably the best public speaker I've ever known. And so I traveled around with him and kind of got to experience like all corners of the Christian world, because he was sort of, you know, one week he'd be speaking in a Mennonite church, the next week he'd be at a Catholic youth conference, the next week he'd be at some evangelical thing. I mean, he was kind of universally beloved in Christendom. So I saw a lot of stuff, you know, and the weird thing is, growing up in that world, is I always thought my dad was cool. I never believed in God. Like the Christian thing didn't make sense to me. Okay, you know, and it wasn't like I was rebellious or I thought it was all, you know, horrible. It was just like they were all nice people, and I thought my dad really believed it. I just couldn't buy in until I was in high school.
Oh, so you didn't buy in, but then you did?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I played soccer. I was a sophomore in my high school, and there was a senior on my soccer team who befriended me. He was like this very cool guy, and he said, you know, he was always trying to hang out with me, and he would take me places. And he's like, hey, why don't you come to this youth group thing with me? And I went along with him, and I walked in, and there were like 300 kids in his youth group. There was a rock band on the stage. They had a laser light show. It was like this big, monster, cool youth group. And I walked into there, and they were all the nicest people I had ever met. Like, everybody was super sweet and wonderful. There were kids from all these different high schools that came together. And I mean, I was a nice kid by that point. Like, I was a nice kid in high school. I was that kind of kid that like would, you know, break up the fight and say, come on, guys, we can all get along. You know, like I was, you know, or if some fat kid was getting made fun of, I would go over and befriend them. And you know, I mean, like I always sort of gravitated towards that kind of like stuff. And when I walked into this youth group, it felt like it was a giant club for nice people. And I wanted to be a part of it. And, you know, I mean, growing up with my dad and growing up in my family and around all that Christian stuff, like I knew the language. So I started hanging around, and I sort of could fake it with the group. But, you know, at some point, one of the guys took me aside, my friend took me aside and took me out to a McDonald's restaurant and said, like, hey, you've been hanging around us a long time. You seem to be into all this stuff. He said, but like, I don't think you've ever accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. So what about it, Bart? Do you want to be a Christian? And I was like, yes, sure. And so we prayed the believer's prayer right there in the McDonald's restaurant, which is not a, yeah, it's not a
McDonald's. That's nice.
Yeah, it's not. I became a McChristian. You know, it's not a glamorous place to become a Christian, but you know, the thing is that what I was really attracted to wasn't the narrative, wasn't the hell and heaven stuff. I was really attracted to the fellowship, to the group, to the sense of like, hey, we're nice people, and we're going to go out there and reach out to other people and bring them into the group and befriend them and, you know, make their lives better. And, you know, it was like, this was a group that was on a mission, and I got really into that. I got swept up in the mission of it. And then, you know, I mean, I was still sort of faking it along. I mean, you know, I would pray these prayers like, dear God, if you're there, say something, do something. Like, I was just like, I wanted it really badly. And I remember at one point, you know, you go on the youth retreat and there's, you know, 200 kids with, you know, candles standing around a campfire singing, our God is an awesome God. And I felt something, you know, like I got swept up in it. And I was like, there's something happening here. This is like, you know, real. Now, you know, a good sociologist would tell you, yeah, that's collective effervescence. That's like, you know, that's the, you know, the neuroscientists would say, oh yeah, there's things that are firing off in your brain because you're in a group of people in synchronous motion, and you're singing these songs, and that's bonding you. Like, I don't know, like you can explain it 100 different ways. I'm just saying, like, I felt something. And because I was in that Christian narrative, and because I was in that Christian group, and because I wanted it to be Jesus, it was Jesus. And then I was in, because then I'd had a transcendent experience, and I had felt the Holy Spirit, if you will. And, you know, I mean, if I'd have been on a Muslim retreat in Afghanistan, I'm sure I would have like become totally sold out Muslim. You know, I mean, whatever narrative you're in, when you have that kind of moment, it confirms it. And so for me, that was, I mean, then I was really in, man. Then I was a serious Christian, and I was a serious Christian for the next 30 years.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, because I always think of people who are Christian, because I never was, that like they were brought into it at a very young age and they just stuck with it. But now I kind of see the point of like how Catholic Church like keeps bringing you in every few years to kind of re-accept your faith, because you kind of have to get the excitement again. Like it can't be the same old thing. So I can see how of people. I've heard this story a couple of times. The kind of, oh, in my teenage years something happened, and that's what kind of.
Yeah, because I mean, think about what's going on when you're a teenager. You're individuating yourself away from your family. So you're like trying to figure out, like, who am I? Like, what's my identity? And what am I going to do with my life? And where do I belong? And who are my friends? And so, you know, like you're trying on different identities. I mean, kids go through all these changes. They experiment with stuff. And so like all of a sudden you walk into a setting that says like, here's an identity, put it on. Here are your friends, right? Here's your purpose in life. You're to go out, you're to go out and try to win people for Jesus. And I think that the other thing is that it's something that taps into, like, you've got a lot of insecurity, and the sin thing sort of says like, yes, there is something wrong with you, Zach, and we can fix it. Yeah. You know, and you know, you're emerging sexually. And so there's a lot of mystery there. And sometimes there's a lot of shame, and a lot of parents don't know how to talk to their kids about stuff. So I'm feeling sort of a vague unease or sexual shame. And the church comes in, or the youth group came in my case, and is like, yes, your sexuality is messed up and we can help you. And so we're going to give you a sexual ethic, and we're going to tell you, and like, you know, it's just the sense of certainty that you're given in a moment of tremendous insecurity. It's like intoxicating. And so, you know, kids, you know, there's a great old sociology book written right after World War II by a blue collar sociologist named Eric Hoffer. And he wrote a book called The True Believer, in which he profiled the kind of people that are prone to join mass movements, whether it's Nazis or the Catholic Church, or becoming a huge supporter of a football team or a marching band. Like, who is it that like climbs in and sort of loses themselves in a group? And you know what, when I read that book, I thought like, yeah, that was me at 15. You know, like that's almost every teenager. I mean, teenagers are very, very vulnerable to being swept up in a group way of thinking. And for me, you know, and the church, you know, like there were these youth workers, and they were very compassionate, and they took me on trips, and we were doing stuff that felt meaningful. I mean, I was 16 years old. I'm leading a Bible study at my school, and like, I'm changing the lives of other high school kids, like drug addicts who join our Bible study and then like stop using drugs and decide to join the church and stuff like that. And you go like, at 16, you feel like you're literally in a battle for the souls of other people. Like it made me feel really significant, you know, really significant. And so, yeah, I got swept up in it, and I mean, like, you know, all these people that tell you these stories about like, oh, the church was so horrible and there's so much hypocrisy, and I hate it. I had a great time. Met the nicest people, did all sorts of good work, you know, got involved in inner city ministry work, working with poor people, fought for social justice, like had the nicest, met a wonderful woman. Like, you know, Christianity was, I mean, if I could take a pill right now and actually go back and believe all that stuff was true, I would probably do it, just like, because then I would have a job again, because I became a professional Christian, you know, like it was a great life for me. It was just that over the course of that life, as I got more and more excited about, you know, community building, or, you know, loving people and transforming their lives by bringing them into a fellowship, and I got more and more excited about social justice and all that stuff, I became less and less able to believe the kind of the bizarre supernatural narrative upon which the whole thing is built. And so, like, you know, I lost my faith kicking and screaming. I wanted to stay.
Well, I wondered so you said you were in for 30 years, but
Yeah.
you probably had your doubts all the time, and you were like a pastor, you were a leader. So what finally just made you say, I can't do this anymore, or at least the Christian part of it?
I mean, and you won't understand this emotionally because you didn't grow up in it, but like, you're part of this community and you want to stay part of it. And like, so what I did was I kept changing my theology. Like, you know, I went to college. I got to be friends with all these gay people. And eventually I was like, yeah, I don't think this being against gay people thing is going to work for me. So then like I looked for Bible verses and I reinterpreted them. And like, then I became like a gay friendly Christian. And then like, I was like, yeah, I don't think all these people that don't believe in God are going to burn in hell. And then I became like a universalist Christian who believes God's going to save everybody. And so like, I jokingly say I passed through every stage of heresy on my way to apostasy. I really tried to stay Christian, but I kept changing and changing and changing. And eventually sort of like my image of God kept changing. And eventually I ended up with a God I totally liked. He agreed with me on everything. And you realize, oh, I invented that one. Like, that's not really God. That's just like, I'm just doing what everybody does. And that is like sort of creating God in my own image so that I can live with him. And I'm going to slide because a loud woman just sat down next to me. And she seemed nice though. And so, yeah, so I, you know, so eventually I'm going through this. And as I'm making all these moves, my Christianity is less and less about like praying and listening to God. And it's more and more about like generally pursuing goodness and love as a way of life. Like, you know, so that, you know, when I finally was done in like 2011, I had a bike crash and it didn't change. Like, and I had a brain injury, and for about a month I was really messed up. And when I recovered, I remember looking at my wife and going like, you know, I'm right here. You smash my head against a tree at 40 miles an hour, I will change. Like, I think I'm in my brain. And I think that when my brain breaks down, I won't exist anymore. Like, I think this life is all we get. And she was like, yeah, I do too. She said, I think you better stop being a professional Christian. There's nothing left for you. There's literally nothing left of your faith. And so when that happened, and I realized like, yeah, I gotta be honest about this. And I sort of started telling people like, I'm done. I'm not an anti-Christian. I'm a post-Christian. Like you know, almost all of my friends were like, oh yeah, we knew you didn't believe in God. We were wondering when you would figure it out. Like, it's sort of like a gay person coming out of the closet. Like, yeah, everybody's like, yeah, duh, we knew when, you know, like why couldn't you figure it out? And so, you know, that was kind of the beginning of the second stage, sort of the second half of my life, where you sort of go like, oh, you still want to pursue love as a pathway. Like, you still want to build social justice. You still want to build community. You still want to, you know, draw people together in little groups that will help each other, you know, become better people, but you don't believe in God anymore. So like, how do you pursue love as a way of life on the other side of faith? And that's what I've been trying to figure out, you know, for the last, you know, 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Like, there's two barriers to that. You know, when you're a pastor, that's kind of like an understood job, but being like in the atheist community, first of all, there's this just automatic pushback against having any kind of leader. Well, sometimes.
No, a lot of people in that atheist
like
community, they're like
pastor, yeah.
Yeah, they don't want a leader. Like they've had bad experiences with authoritarian leaders. They're like, leaders that leads to corruption, and you know, and so there's a lot of those groups that they don't want anybody to be kind of a pastoral caregiver like I was, and like I still am. So you're right. There's a barrier there.
And has that been like your struggle, I guess, for the past 7 to 8 years? Is you're trying to either make it into a living or to convince people that it's a needed.
Wait, like you and I were at that Nanocon thing, and you know, that's an event that draws a lot of people from what I would consider to be the mainstream secular community. You know, like atheists of America, you know, American atheists are there, and you know, black non-believers, and like these are like activists, like these are people that fight for the separation of church and state, and you know, they, you know, debate Christians sometimes, and they you know, they're engaged in that kind of stuff. And when I first came out of Christianity, I sort of was looking for that, for some community, and I went to those places, and I quickly realized, like, oh yeah, these people they don't want anyone like me, like that, like, you know, all this kind of, you know, touchy feely, warm, lovey stuff. They're like, yeah, dude, you're not our deal, you know. Like I would give a talk, I would get invited to give a talk somewhere, and they'd be like, hey, you know, you told some stories there that made people cry, and it was like you were trying to reach people emotionally, and that's not cool. We do reason here. And I was like, well, if you guys were really rational, you would know that you can't motivate anybody by speaking to their reason, that you have to speak to their emotions. And they were like, yeah, we're not doing that. And so I really felt like, gosh, I'm not a good fit for that community. But I also kept running into other people who felt like they didn't fit that community. Who were like, yeah, you know what? I want to actually, I do want sort of almost like, I want to be part of a religious community. I want that sense of mission, and I want that sense of fellowship. I just don't believe in any God. So like, couldn't we do like some kind of religion for people who don't believe in God, or some kind of church for people that don't believe in God? You know, couldn't we like organize ourselves in a way where we took some of that technology of like meeting together and encouraging each other, and having somebody who's really good at helping to talk with people when they're feeling sad or in trouble, and like having somebody who, like, you know, does that kind of work. And I just met a lot of people who are like, we should try to figure out how to do that, because, you know, most of the people that we know that go to church, they're not there because like the narrative makes any sense to them. I mean, it's a crazy narrative, right? People flying Jesus and people rising from the dead and virgin births and stuff, like that's not intuitive to anybody. The reason people stick with it isn't because it makes sense to them. It's because they need that kind of structure for their sort of spiritual and emotional lives. And so, you know, the question is, so could we create something that helps people structure their emotional lives and their spiritual lives and their relationship lives that is, you know, that's grounded in reason, you know, the kind of says, hey, we should pursue love, not because God tells us to, but because, like, evolutionarily speaking, it's a really good strategy for like flourishing as a human being. Even if this life is the only one that you have, it's still a good idea.
Yeah, I think that idea of like 100% reason, if you think, oh, what are the favorite podcasts people listen to, or what are the favorite people they go to conferences to see, they don't go because, like, man, that guy Logic's so good. It's like the ability to tell stories, the ability to throw emotion in. What's better or more sometimes depressing, but better than like hearing someone's kind of deconversion story, because you're hearing this individual story instead of like, well, here's why religion doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, you gotta humanize it. It's a good name for a podcast.
Yeah, we should. I mean, the thing is, like, I understand when people are angry because they feel like they got duped, and when they've got some frustration, or like there's a lot of harm that happens to people. Like, you know, evangelical Christianity, like the one I came out of, sent a lot of really weird messages to women about roles, and to people about their feeling shameful about their sexuality, fear of burning in hell. Like, there's a lot of really bad stuff in there. That's like, you know, that. So I understand when people are angry and frustrated, but at some point, like, I don't want to make a cottage industry out of that. I don't want to stay in that place. I want to go like, okay, I've worked out some of my anger or my frustration. Now, like, what next? Like, how do I make the most of this life? And I'm just convinced that, you know, that there's a lot of people that are sort of looking for that what's next. Where do we go from here? How do we really, I mean, if we really do believe that this life is all that there is, how do we, and that we're surrounded by like amazing stuff, like awe-inspiring nature and incredibly complex brains and hugely bizarre evolved emotions. How do we make, like, I mean, you're incredibly lucky. You know, Richard Dawkins, I don't know if you ever heard his thing where he, like, you've won the cosmic lottery. Out of all the matter and energy in the universe, you're like the infinitesimal percentage that gets to be conscious. Like, you won. And like, what do you do with that bounty? What do you do with that unbelievable good fortune to be conscious? Like, how do you enjoy it? And I think there are a lot of people who are like, could you help me with that? Because I don't really know. I'm not really having, like, what's funny is like, I'm not really having that good a time here. I'm full of anxiety. I'm depressed. I'm lonely. You know, could somebody show me how to do this thing?
Well, can you?
You know,
You're
like,
the guy.
I feel like it's sort of like I can create a space. Like if learning how to fly radio control model airplanes was the most important thing in your life, I don't know a lot about radio control model airplanes, but I could organize a club of radio control model airplane enthusiasts, and we would bring in people and we would swap stories and we would practice building the planes and flying them. Like if that was the most important thing in the world, I couldn't answer all your questions, but I could organize a place where your questions could be answered, right? Because I've got that ability. And you go like, well, I don't think it is radio control model airplanes. I don't think that's the key. You go like, how about loving relationships? I go like, that is the key. And you go like, well, can you tell me everything I need to know about loving relationships? No, but I can organize a place where we can figure it out together. And that's when I say community building, that's the kind of community I'm excited about building. It's like a tribe of people who say, you know what? We like, just like people are like, I should get in shape. Yeah, I should get in shape. But I don't. I eat crappy food. Yeah, I sit on the couch. We should join a club. We should join a health club, and like we'll all motivate each other. Or like we should stop, you know, drinking ourselves blind drunk and ruining our lives. Like, oh, let's get together and help each other. There's this sense in which whenever human beings pursue a goal together, they have a better chance than if they each do it individually. And so I'm just like, okay, well, like, if the goal is to make the most of this life using science and reason as kind of helpful tools, hey, Zach, you know, how about you come over to my house and I'll invite Vinny and Marianne and like we'll do it together. And that way, like, if you start to like get a little discouraged, maybe Marianne can encourage you. And then like 3 months later, when she's messed up, you can help her out. And like together we'll grow.
I think we might be onto something. I wanted to talk about like Nanocon since we were both there, but in terms of as someone who presents at conferences, because you speak at conferences and you're speaking at a conference this weekend, and the frustration you can get because you're like, you know what, I'm talking, but I'm not hearing what other people have to say, and I'm not getting a feel for what's going on in the movement, whatever that is. So maybe you can catch me up. You've kind of done that a little bit already, but in terms of what you got to speak about, you had I think a workshop on building community, and then you actually did like a session where you got some of your Cincinnati people together to show people what it's like to have like a local kind of secular group.
Yeah. You know, here's the thing. What we've started doing in Cincinnati, just like my friends and I, is we were planning to do some big hairy thing and we just couldn't get the right venue and we didn't have enough money. And so finally we're like, let's just do a little soft opening in my dining room. Yeah, I get a big dining room in my house. So we clear it out. We take the table out of there. We set up like 25 chairs and our friends come over and we do kind of a Sunday morning program. Like it's a combination of like music, guided meditation, maybe a 15-minute talk. Sometimes there's a readings. We mix it up, but it's always sort of thematically oriented to kind of help us to think through something like self-care or forgiveness, or you know, how to build better relationships with people who think differently than us. Like, it's like a club for people that are trying to figure out how to have better relationships. And so we do that every other week, and it's nothing fancy. I mean, like, but we plan it like crazy. And so the actual 45 minutes tend to be really good, really fun. And people come and they don't have to feel the pressure of like, I have to talk. They can just sort of sit there like you're at a concert, and it sort of washes over you, and you participate as much as you want to. So anyway, when we were at Nanocon, the first day I was there, like, I did this thing about how to find your tribe, which was kind of, or how to build your tribe, which was kind of aimed at people that are feeling isolated in their secular goodness, and they're trying to find other people to kind of to work together. And so I gave them a whole bunch of really practical tips about how to find people, how to articulate what you're looking for in a way that people can find you. But like, ultimately, most people are like, yeah, but what would it look like if we actually did it? And so then like, yeah, on the Sunday, we took what we do in Cincinnati, and we just took a sample one of those, and we just did it. Were you there?
No, I was listening to the Black Non-Believer one, so I was in the building. And
wow. There were like 35 people there, and it was really moving, because they were 35 strangers when they came in, but like, the whole thing is about connecting people to each other. And we went through some stuff together. And by the end of it, it was like we had all had this kind of emotionally resonant, yet completely like appealed to our reason. Like, there was nothing there that made anybody go like, that's woo woo. Like, it was all straight. But afterwards, like, people were like, that was so great. Like, I really feel refreshed. I really feel inspired. And I was like, you could just go do that in your living room. And on the show, we have this like Patreon page. Every podcast, or a lot of podcasts, have these Patreon pages where people support the show, but we also post special content there. And so what we've taken to doing is we post the outlines and the videos and the music and all the stuff that we do, including like a little video of the talk. And so if somebody wants to do something like this in their living room with 10 of their friends, but they don't have all the planning time, and that's not their gift, is planning cool meetings, they can just like bogart our meeting and do it. It's like a do-it-yourself home meeting. And so a lot of the people that came to that thing were like, that's what I'm going to do. We're going to do that at our house.
Well, that's pretty amazing, because you can kind of step people through like why they should do something, but then showing them the how is important too. And I think that was the good part of Nanocon. As I mentioned before, the downside was I think there were like 13 different workshops. So even if you saw 2, you didn't really, it was hard to see it all. And I guess that's the whole point of a conference.
I guess I never, like, when I used to run conferences, you're trying to find the sweet spot, because I wanted every seminar to have a lot of people in it. Because you spend money to bring these seminar speakers there. You want people to be exposed to them, but like, I didn't want to have. You still want to have enough variety so that people could find something that like really, really reached them. But I think at all these conferences I go to, like, I feel like there's so many presentations, and there's not enough time to stand around and talk about what you just heard and sort of like process it. Now you got to get to the next presentation, and so I think there needs to be a little bit more time for people to process.
Yeah, that's true. You've probably seen it all in terms of conference life. But outside of conference life, you are a humanist chaplain at University of Cincinnati. So how does one get into that position? And do people go, well, why do we need a chaplain?
Well, I mean, how you get into that position is you show up on the campus of the University of Cincinnati, you look around, and then you like print yourself some business cards at Kinko's that say you're the humanist chaplain. And I'm the humanist chaplain at the University of Cincinnati. You go like, they don't pay you, you're just like, did you go to college?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where'd you go?
University of Missouri.
Okay, so at Missouri, I guarantee you, like on your campus, there were a bunch of Christian kids involved with like Campus Crusade for Christ, and then
Probably.
there was like a Catholic student union, and then there was like a little Muslim student club, and then there were like, you know, there are all these Christian ministries that are on these campuses and other kinds of ministries that are, and none of them get paid. Like they all get supported by their local church or by their supporters, because they're like, go to the campus and proselytize people for Jesus. In a sense, I go to the campus to proselytize people for making the most of their life. You know, so I don't go there to try to undermine Christians on the campus. I go there looking for all the atheist students, the kids who don't believe in God. And I end up going to them like, so, like, you don't believe in God? And they're like, no. I'm like, so you think this life is all that there is? And they go like, yeah. And I go like, so what are you going to do with your life? And they're like, I don't know. Like, I'm going to get a really good job and buy a boat. And I'm like, really? Like, you have one chance at consciousness, and you think that the way to make the most of it is by making rich people richer and buying consumer goods? I think there's more. And they go like, well, what would be better than that? I'm like, well, there's this other kind of lifestyle that you could live, where you could proactively pursue goodness, where you could try to make the world better for other people, where you could try to build relationships that were really significant, where you had a lot of meaning between you, and where you cultivated a sense of wonder and gratitude for the privilege of being alive. And you actively sought out experiences that would turn you on to like how cool the universe is. And they're like, well, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, because every study I've ever read says that people that do that live longer, live happier, and register much higher degrees of satisfaction with their lives at the end. And they're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. So like, I'm trying to turn people on. I'm not trying to turn Christians into atheists. I'm trying to turn atheists into people that are fully actualized, you know? And so it's a, you know, and you say like, why do you do it? And I go like, because it's really fun. It's really fun to see the light bulb turn on in a kid's eyes and them go like, oh, life is way cooler than I thought it was. And like, oh, I can have friendships that are way deeper than I thought I was going to have. And so it's just fun to kind of watch people that you go like, well, why do you want to help them flourish? And I go like, oh, because that makes me flourish. Like it's selfish. I mean, like if I thought making a lot of money was more fun than turning young people's lives around, I would go make a lot of money. But I think turning people's lives around is a lot more fun, a lot more exciting.
Well, do you have like an official relationship with the university, or just kind of get together and?
No, when I was the humanist chaplain at USC, I had an official relationship with the university. They didn't pay me, but the dean of religious life, it was a private university. They had a dean of religious life. He invited me to come to the campus to be the chaplain. He gave me an office, gave me access to professors. It was very easy to work there. And I built this lovely secular student fellowship there that still exists. As a matter of fact, the person who, when I left, my friend Ryan Bell said, I'll be the humanist chaplain there. And so now he's the humanist chaplain at USC. And it's a really beautiful thing. At the University of Cincinnati, it's a public university, and they don't have any kind of office of religious life. And so you really are kind of, you're kind of a pirate. You're doing your, you know, like, I mean, they know I'm there, and like, I go out and set up a table like anybody else can, you know, and, you know, put a sign out that says, are you a humanist? And students come by and go like, I don't know, what is a humanist? And then we're off to the races. And that's how you recruit kids to join the group. And then once you've got those kids in the group, they recruit other kids to be in the group. And that's kind of how you build a secular student fellowship.
Okay. So you're able to, I mean, I guess the Christian people come in and do the same kind of thing.
Exactly. And I think
on campus, or they're individuals.
Yeah.
With them.
I mean, what's funny is my office at UC is not given to me by the university. There is a ministry across the street from the university that's run by the Lutheran Church called Edge House. And the Lutheran pastor, when she found out I was there, she had read about me in the New York Times when I was at USC, in the New York Times Magazine, because they did a profile of me being a humanist chaplain, because they thought that was really cool, because it's unusual, right? And so she, when she found out I'd moved back to Cincinnati, she said, how can I help you? She said, I work with these Lutheran kids, but she's like, many students at this campus don't believe in God, and they have nobody helping them, like when their mother gets cancer, or when they break up with their girlfriend, or when they're suicidal. There's no kind of nurture for them. She's like, how can I help you? And I said, like, well, I need an office. She said, oh, you can have an office in our place. And so the Lutherans give me an office because they think that humanism should be strong, which I think is kind of cool.
It's nice you're getting that kind of assistance there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have great dialogues. I mean, obviously she's a very progressive and liberal kind of Christian. But it's still, I think it's kind of a stretch when the Christians sort of go like, and she's a little bit like my dad, because my dad looks at me and he says, listen, I still believe in Jesus and all that stuff. He said, but like, I know there are lots and lots of people out there that don't believe in God and can't believe in God. And I would much rather they be running with you and your crew than just out there in the world all by themselves, not doing anything. So he's like, I think what you're doing is wonderful. My dad is super supportive.
It's pretty awesome.
And by the way, not to plug anything, but you mentioned
toward the plug time, but definitely do it now.
Well, you mentioned the book I wrote with my dad, which is it's an interesting book, I think. But when we were writing that book, we recorded some conversations, and a filmmaker came in and he recorded us talking to each other. And after it was over, he was like, I think I've got a story here. Can I make a documentary film? And so he added all kinds of other footage, and he ended up making this movie called Leaving My Father's Faith, which is kind of the story of me coming out as a secular humanist and my hyper evangelical father sort of responding and reacting. And he and I have all these conversations. And for some of your listeners, maybe, who struggle to figure out how to talk with Christians, it's actually a pretty good movie in terms of showing how a relationship can be genuine and loving and honest when people are on other sides, on different sides of that divide. Because it's not a debate movie; it's a real conversation.
And that's it's a rare thing. I think that's why I got tired of kind of debates
between
believers and unbelievers, because they were trying to win a debate and also just yelling. They're talking to each other.
So I think you would like it. And actually, if you're interested, like, it streams on Amazon. Like, it's easy to find, and it costs like $3. Like, it's kind of a neat thing. And I've had Christian people write me and say, oh, that movie was so helpful. Like, in terms of like, now I understand that, secular people can be really good, which is nice. And then I get letters from secular people like, oh, that movie really helped me. Like, now I know how to talk to my mother.
Right.
So.
And you're humanizing. But so before we get to the finale and you get to tell everybody where they can find you, and there's just too much Bart out there, it's just too much to contain in a 45-minute discussion. But that means there might have to be a part deux, Bart Campolo 201, if you were. So people know you as like humanist chaplain. They know you as an organizer. They know you as the guy who's almost single-handedly keeping the stereotype of the white, bald atheist guy going.
I'm working at it.
For the people who know you as these things, do you have like a talent or a skill or something that you do that people might not know about that's like nothing to do with your kind of organizing? Or even a hobby?
I mean, I do. I mean, like, I'm a big movie guy. I watch a lot of, I watch kind of artsy films. I love, my ankles are shot, and both have been operated on. Every step I take is excruciatingly painful these days. But I can ride a bicycle. And so I'm a really avid bicycle rider. And I ride for work. I ride to work. I ride a road bike. I ride a tandem with my wife. That's this really funky tandem where she's recumbent in front of me and I'm upright behind her, and we talk while we ride. Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, I'm really into cycling. Let's see. Here's something. Zach. I have an incredibly hairy chest, and occasionally, if I'm in front of a group and they pay me enough money, I light my chest on fire. And I can light my chest hair on fire in a dark room, and it will blaze, and it's rather exciting when it happens.
That's quite the party trick.
Yeah. So there you go.
That's the kind of thing you're like, well, maybe say that for the second date, but I understand. But oh gosh, we could have some bike stories. We'll say that for another time. Sadly, yeah, we're at the end here. So where can people track down your content, your podcast? Sadly, you were just on such a roll, and I liked hearing about your community talk that I didn't get to talk to you much in detail about your podcast, but feel free to do a little elevator pitch / just tell people where to find all things Bart.
Well, when you were saying like at these conferences, you don't get to talk to you don't get to hear what other people are doing. I mean, what I get to do on my podcast is called Humanize Me. And the idea, the conceit of the podcast is that I really want to become a better person. I want to grow. I want to become a better lover. I want to become more aware of the world. I want to understand things. And so I invite guests like scientists, actors, musicians, activists, like people from all walks of life. And I'm always sort of like trying to figure out like what they do and how it's relevant for somebody like me or you or everyone in my audience, how we can use what they're learning and their expertise to kind of live better lives. And so, I talk to an incredible array of people, and that's kind of how I know what's going on out there. And so sometimes I'm talking to people that you would know, like a Seth Andrews or somebody like that, or somebody in the secular movement. And then sometimes I'm talking to like a philosopher like Peter Rollins, or an actor, or somebody, like I talked to this one woman, Holly Laurent, who actually runs a podcast now called Mega that a lot of people are listening to. It's a parody of a mega church. And, but Holly's a famous improvisational actor in Los Angeles. And so I had her on, and she talked about what she was learning in improv, what she learned about life as an actor. And then it was incredibly, it was like all this yes and like going with the other person. Stuff was super applicable to me. So the podcast is like humanizemepodcast.com, or just you just Google Bart Campolo, you'll find it. The podcast is kind of my biggest outlet. And then there in Cincinnati, I'm doing my little local organizing thing. So if somebody's coming to Cincinnati, they should call me, check in, and I'll see if they can come visit us sometime. And then, I do the work with students. I wish I was a better writer, because then I would write books, but I don't really write books. I just have the one. I'm kind of a schlubby guy. Like basically I'm like a small town pastor, who works with people on a very, very, like gut level. Oh, the other thing I do, Zach, I counsel people all over the world. That's actually how I make a living. I counsel people who via Skype, who are working through difficult religious transitions or struggling with stuff in their relationships. Mostly they're people who have listened to podcasts and they go like, that guy sort of seems to have a little bit of an angle on relationship stuff. I've got a problem. And then they'll call and we'll set up a regular thing. And so I counsel people, and all that stuff you could find out about at bartcampolo.org. Is that enough of a pitch?
I think you got it. Yeah.
All right.
It'll find you. I'll include all links in the show notes. And thank you, Bart, for allowing me to actually get someone from Nanocon on this week. I was like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to do it. And then you like reached out to me like last night. And
listen, I'm so grateful. Like, this whole movement of trying to make the world a better place in a secular way. This is like the Silicon Valley in 1960. Bunch of people in their garages trying to figure it out. Like, and eventually some big things will emerge, like, but really we're just all trying to figure stuff out. We're just all trying to figure it out. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing, that, that you're like consistently putting out content that's aimed at sort of bringing good messages to people who might feel a little bit isolated out there. So it was a pleasure to meet you at Nanocon. And I feel really honored to have been on your show.
Well, thanks a lot, Bart. And have fun this weekend in Madison as well.
I'll do it, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Sounds good.